people use the word data, but when we really get down to it, what is it? It's any input of any information that is yours. So if you share your name, that's data. If you share your phone number, that's data. If you sign an agreement, that's also data. Data doesn't necessarily need to be digital to be data. Despite best endeavors to keep building vaults and cloud protection, firewalls and early detection and all these things, the bad actors are getting bigger, smarter, cleverer, better resource. If someone creates a profile, be it banking, be it social media, every single time you're asked to create a password, we provide the ability to allow people to actually truly own that information for themselves, but to own it in a way that it's fragmented, it's encrypted, and it's secured.
You guys had a very interesting crowdfunding journey. Talk us through that journey.
We really like the idea of enabling people who get us, who like us, who are interested in us, to invest in us. First of all, I have to stress, Spark crowdfunding is not there to just say, hey, here's my video pitch, where's my money, right? There's a lot of work.
I'd like to get your views around the fintech. What are the current challenges you see and where you'd like to go in the next 5 years?
I do think that there's a huge element of fintech that kind of needs to grow up and not just be outside the glass house throwing stones back in.
Ooh. Aidan, tell us some moments, if you can share some good stories, some really, really hard walls.
Yeah, there's probably one in particular that was pretty hard.
Welcome to the pod, Aidan. I was looking forward to this, but I think it's going to be an unbelievable conversation. You guys are an amazing journey from a crowdfunding perspective, but the technology as well, everything you guys are building is super exciting. Welcome to the pod, Aidan.
Thank you, sir. And likewise, I've been enjoying this. You and I have threatened to have this conversation many times, but delighted to do it.
Yeah, we're making it happen now. So Aidan, let's just jump straight into it. Give us the background about yourself, right? You can touch on your co-founders as well, right? And Binarii Labs as well, where did the name come from, and what are you guys up to as well?
Yeah, well, we go back before the name to how we came about. So Kieran McNamee and myself had worked together as co-founders previously in an enterprise DLT project that has since moved to Switzerland, and we took an opportunity with new investment coming into that to exit towards the end of 2020 now. Amazing. So I suppose Kieran's background was, prior to that, had been pretty much deep dive into digital, into DLT, and into tokenization and the world of tokenization, and understanding, what it should mean or could mean, or maybe might mean in the future. And I suppose at that stage, back in sort of 2016, 17, I wasn't in technology at all. I was in general. I worked in retail. I was a general manager. I was operations director. All in sort of much more traditional industries. So, but I understood commerce. I understood marketplace. I understood the need for disruption. And when Kieran and I, as I said, stepped out of previous business, it wasn't with a view to doing anything necessarily together. But pretty soon afterwards, I was actually introduced to our newest, I should say, co-founder, Stephen Garner, who I met briefly online. And bear in mind, this was actually during lockdown.
Yes.
So I met Stephen online through an introduction and was absolutely blown away by him, his background, but also the immense sort of volume of solutions that he had been creating. Stephen came from originally being a chartered accountant, then as a mathematician of sorts, never formally, he started coding. Then he ended up working in banking as a technologist. Then he was brought to New York to work on Wall Street as in JP Morgan, and he ended up heading a massive team in risk and looking after a team that created actually the world's first digital derivative trading platform. So Stephen was one of the first people I've met in the industries that had an absolute understanding of both the technology and the problems.
Yes.
And the problem that he focused on was around not so much privacy, but protection of data, protection of data in financial services specifically. And that data people use the word data not loosely, but it is very general, right? But when we really get down to it, what is it? And it's any input of any information that is yours, okay? So if you share your name, that's data. If you share your phone number, that's data. If you sign an agreement, that's also data, right? So, data doesn't necessarily need to be digital to be data, is my point. And, Stephen firmly saw that and actually set about building a solution around document protection first and foremost, which a lot of people may not find particularly interesting or sexy, but the way he went about it and the proprietary way in which he invented the manner in which we now have executed to build products around protecting all sorts of data in different ways just blew us away. So during COVID, online, Nigel Carter and Stephen Garner, who are our two co-founders, who were based at the time in the UK, and myself and Kieran, based here in Ireland, we started to engage and see what could we do and how could we make this really work and commercialize this. So in September 2021, Binarii Labs was born, and that was after about 4 months of kind of maybe kicking the can around, figuring out how could we do something, what could we do, and then 4 months of a phenomenal amount of work on all four of our parts to form an agreement, reach out to investors, bring in some people to help us, and to get started. So in September 2021, we raised a small sort of family friends, but more angels round, and Binarii Labs was born. And we came to the first conversation we had was what would we call ourselves?
Yes.
And we did a whole series of sophisticated whiteboard sessions, planning everything. And then one day I just was thinking like, what are we doing? And I looked it up and I found, out of curiosity, what is the Latin for binary? And it's binary. So we said, right, that's it. The guys liked it. So he said, right, we're Binarii because we are a lab. We work with binary code and we create, solutions. So that was it.
That was clever.
Binarii. So Binarii Labs became the name that resonated with us all. And it's funny, a lot of things emerged from that, like, our values, our mission, our statement. We have it here where we are thoughtful technologists, right? And the other thing that has really resonated with people is we make blockchain boring. So the two kind of catchphrases that came out of at that stage was, Binarii Labs, we are Binarii Labs, and why are we Binarii Labs? And secondly, we make blockchain boring. And what is meant by that is, even though our solution is incredibly exciting and innovative, and blockchain is a part of the tech stack, it's not. I wouldn't call us a blockchain solution. But we're one of the few that I see that is able to have a conversation to logically explain why does blockchain exist within our solution, and how does it solve the problem, and that is a really important fundamental part of our IP. It's also a massive part of our tech stack. Without it, we would not have the ability to provide the automated digital data timestamps that we call proof of record, that are key to providing the ability to provide provenance around the data that exists, when it existed, who created it, when it was secured, and who shared it. But we make blockchain boring because we do all this in the background. The user doesn't need to necessarily know too much about it, but just trust that it works and understand, if they want to, how it works in a very reliable and dependable way that's repeatable and is frictionless in terms of how people can use it.
I love the tagline, born, dependable, and fit for business. Is a great tagline that you guys have on the website. That was like bang on. Even how you guys came together, right? The different skill sets, and the fact that you guys focus on the problem, right? And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
can the blockchain, the DLT, solve this problem? Tell us about a bit about your products. DMS, you talked about it, right? But you also have the AMS, right? And another one around accounting. So unpack that a
Yeah,
bit.
AMS is really a derivative of DMS, if you like, and it's not something we've launched yet. It's something we're working on that can and will roll out of DMS. But it's essentially, look, there's a huge problem in understanding how onboarding of a customer in any form of business, but particularly in a regulated financial services business, how the data, which is personal identifiable information, is managed, how it's secured, and how, even with GDPR, how the stakeholder, who is the data owner, can have any degree of confidence that, as to how this valuable and sensitive information is being treated, where it's going, how it's being secured, and who's sharing it. And we look at the Digital Operation Resilience Act, and we take a lot of comfort, actually, that regulators are also identifying this as an important area where industry needs to up their game. Because KYC and AML there's so many innovative KYC and AML solutions out there. We're not necessarily saying that that's our business, but we have a product that can facilitate those providers. It can service the enterprise itself, and do so in a way that looks after the stakeholder interests. So there's a bit of fluidity around how AMS will and can materialize ultimately, and that's because we actually have a huge degree of flexibility around how we can execute. And what I mean by that is, fundamentally, our product and our solution, which is, by the way, it's now US and UK patented, right? So this is IP. This is our proprietary creation that Stephen came up with. What it does is it uses a tech stack that blends blockchain and not so much multi-party computing, but multi-cloud, but does it in a way that's very different to anything out there, in a way that allows the user or the owner or the custodian of the information to actually hold that information truly and not have to then rely on a third party. Because so many services that are being offered are ultimately saying, we will do an amazing job of securing your data and keeping it safe for you, right? We're not doing that. We're actually saying you have a right to own
your data,
control your data. And if you choose to share it with another entity, you have a right to understand that how they are also custodying your data with the level of care and respect that it deserves. So we all trust that the major cloud providers will be in business tomorrow. We trust that they'll be in business next year. We expect they'll be in business for a very long time. Let's face it. Okay?
I don't think you have any worries there, Aidan.
Yeah. What we have concerns about is how secure is our data when we exclusively give it to them.
Yes.
Okay. So if we exclusively say to a cloud provider, here you go, you mine our data for us, whether that's in our own environment or a third party's environment that's got firewalls and everything else built around it, track record would show that maybe you might even say losing a battle, right? Literally every 11 seconds there is an attempted attack on a cloud system, and alarmingly every 40 seconds one of those is successful, and that's 24/7 around the clock. So clearly there's an issue where, despite best endeavors to keep building vaults and cloud protection, firewalls and early detection and all these things, that the bad actors are are getting bigger, smarter, cleverer, better resourced. So rather than saying, look, let's discard that ecosystem altogether because it has built phenomenal technology that's capable of doing amazing things in storing information, the approach is, why don't we use them, but let's not have to trust them to give them all of the data every time. So if you own 3 cloud accounts instead of 1, basically in a nutshell, we have the ability to take your data, to mix it up, to duplicate it so it's backed up, but then fragment it, encrypt it, and distribute it across those 3 clouds such that no one cloud ever holds the complete file, right? What that means is if you do have a cloud breach, number one, you've got an automated backup without having to action disaster recovery. And number 2, you have business continuity because you have continued access to your data through the other cloud environments, because the system, there's no latency issue here. The system continues to allow you to access your data that you've secured, even though one of your clouds might be down or worse still been breached. So that's the essence of how we propose to protect people's data. And you might start to see now what I mean by saying there's fluidity in how that's implemented, because whomever decides to be the data controller and the owner or holder of the data in this scenario can protect using this system. So if that is the entity that requires to onboard clients and hold their PII because they have to, they can do this, and they can now show their stakeholder that actually we have it here. This is how we're doing it, and this is how we're protecting it. But you can flip that on its head and say they could also choose to allow the end user to be the one that has multi-clouds, to onboard their own documentation, to secure it on their end, and give permissioned access to the enterprise to view it at all times. Now they don't hold it or own it, but now they have access to it.
You can clearly see the application of DLT on this one is absolutely a no-brainer, and you also can see as well the problem is solving very, very clearly. Aidan, talk to me a bit, and you touched on Dora, but we wouldn't deep dive too much on that. But talk to me a bit, talk to me a bit on the right be forgotten as well. How did you guys think about that? Because I think it's a big hurdle, right?
Yeah, no,
particularly when
it's
you want to
massive,
deal with enterprises.
It's a fundamental flaw in so many blockchain solutions that are out there, that they either don't understand GDPR or they don't care. Where we use blockchain in this is actually not to store. And look, some people might see this as I don't know if it's as big as to say it's controversial, but I don't fundamentally believe in that blockchain is a use case for document storage or data storage. So we don't do that. We embrace the well-trodden path of cloud storage, but we're indexing and proving the securing of the data every single time via a blockchain record. And that blockchain record is completely anonymous. There's no information in there apart from an ability that we've created to prove that this document over here was recorded over here in the cloud at this date and time by this person, because that is what's been proven on the blockchain. So every time a record is created, it's proven to be so on a separate, independent ledger record that's immutable, uneditable, and transparent. So the problem with people say, well, why can't you just use cloud, right? The problem with cloud databases that have been used in this regard is people have chosen to figure out how to cheat the system and backdate, right? Yes. Or at times delete or edit or even change profiles. What we're doing is we give every enterprise the ability to create a digital profile per user. That means that every time that user, being a staff member, executes by just simply uploading a file, that's logged on the blockchain. who did
Yes.
it, what date they did it, what time they did it, and a unique identifier number that says this equals this, i.e., this record is a unique identifier number, links uniquely to this document over here. Now, what that means is, even if it's inadvertent, if a subsequent version of that agreement, let's say it was, is produced and it's different, we have the immediate ability to look up and prove that this is not the agreement that was executed, or this is not the contract that was agreed, or this is not the IOU that was written between two parties, right? Or or it's not the IP that was created, right? If somebody wants to secure, and this is how horizontal our solution can become. If someone has a blueprint and takes a photograph and creates a proof of record for that blueprint, they've now got an immutable proof of record with a date and time of the data creation and ideation of that blueprint.
And I love the use case. It's very, if you really want to go after the DLT space,
Well, I would
and
say
it has to
our
be hybrid as
chairperson,
well,
right?
right?
I'll tell you this: our chairperson is Dr. Amar Kumar, and Dr. Amar Kumar created the Zilliqa blockchain. He invented it. He says, don't ever reference yourself as a use case. You're not, because you're a solution.
Yeah.
So that it's really good though if you think about that, right? And you think about how many people talk about theoretical use cases for blockchain. That's where we stand out and hope to stand out, because we're saying, look, we're actually got product here coming to market that is a solution, and it's an active solution using blockchain.
I love the word of use case, because you're constantly iterating the product, so you're constantly solving problems, so you're constantly trying to identify different pain points, jobs to be done, so you're constantly trying to evolve and find different use cases. So it's one of the, I guess, it's a philosophical,
No, this is
a solution to a particular thing at a particular point in time.
We look at use cases in conceptualizing and bringing about potential solutions. So, when we start to try and do validation or understanding of, we've got a lot in Sandbox that's going to come after our first two products. And our first two products are Binarii DMS, which is the document management system, and the second one, which is Secure, which is actually protecting people's mostly access credentials. But in truth, it could be anything they want to keep secret. So it's a browser extension that allows people to type in information that's personal and sensitive and important to them and secure it. But secure it in their own cloud environment, knowing that they can input the information offline. The process of securing it of entering it can all happen offline, so that no one can be shadowing or shouldering or scraping. And then the upload, if you want to call it that, occurs online, where it's in their own personal cloud, but it's not in one cloud, it's in three, and it's mixed up, it's encrypted, it's fragmented, it's broken up into tiny pieces, so that if somebody does hack their cloud, they're going to find, instead of finding files, even encrypted files, they find thousands of fragments and tiny encrypted fragments.
Talk to me about some clients you guys are working with. So you guys have piloted this with around the world, right? It'll be interesting to see, one of the solutions in action where you guys doing at the moment.
It's early days, honestly. So, our first pilot is ongoing, and that's with a legal firm in document management. But where we're going globally is with Secure. And Secure we have 35 distributors signed up globally. One of the key ones is in South Africa and India as well. But we have Asia and a lot around Europe. And these are people who have a real interest in providing the product to their communities, to their networks, to help them principally at this stage to protect their access credentials for sensitive sensitive profiles like crypto wallets, for instance, right? We're not a wallet, and we're not a provider in that sector. But what we are providing is the ability for people to secure their seed words and to literally not have to write them down in pieces of paper.
That's an interesting one, actually.
Put them away in a box that they can literally, and not put them in a digital vault, because so many digital vaults are centralized databases that really rely on the ability for the provider of that vault to keep bad actors out. And it also means, like, it's funny, you know that industry very well, probably a lot better than we do even. But it's funny to me that people talk about self-custody of digital assets, and yet the fundamental piece to that self-custody is protecting their seed words.
Yes.
And there's no real solution for that I can find that's not manual, analog, or resorts to using a centralized database. So the whole principle of enabling people to hold their own secrets secure, their own data secure, their own passwords secure, comes back to, well, if you write them down on a piece of paper and you lock them in a safe, make sure you keep them, because if you lose them, you're in big trouble. But if someone else gets them, you're in big trouble. So it's on you. And we see that. And frankly, when I first met Stephen and I saw what he was doing with documents, we both, Kieran and I, said, wow, this is, like, think about it. Your seed words are essentially just pieces of data that can be treated just like a document. So we have a way to say, look, if someone creates a profile, be it banking, be it a crypto wallet, be it social media, every single time you're asked to create an access credential, you're asked to create a password.
Yes.
And it's estimated that I think it is that everyone has over 100 different individual passwords each, created for profiles they use at any one time. And there is an ability, we hope, we provide the ability to allow people to actually truly own that information for themselves, but to own it in a way that it's fragmented, it's encrypted, and it's secured within their own environment that they own. Like, if you own an iCloud account, it's yours.
It should be.
Yeah?
It should be.
But but the concern about other people maybe accessing or copying or scraping is real with any major provider, but only if you give them, unprotected and complete files.
I think that solution is very neat, because as well, from a go-to-market strategy perspective, you can plug it into the main infrastructures, and you can, in the future, log it with Cycle, right? And you also fully package it as well, from a back-end perspective, so the user doesn't need to worry about everything you mentioned, Aidan, right?
Totally, but the big thing about this is this is a Web 2 solution as well.
It is.
And that's the point, right?
That's for sure. 2.5. Let's just say 2.5.
Yeah, but we, in terms of who we service, we're kicking off by going to who we feel are the people who are most digitally native, who most understand the problem, actually, and who most need it. However, 98% of the world also need it to protect their social media access credentials, to protect their banking access credentials, to protect their social welfare or revenue access credentials, to protect their PIN numbers for their credit cards or debit cards, right? These are things that are not just passwords. That's why we're not saying we're a password manager.
Yeah.
But we're enabling you to secure these things in such a way that when you really need them, no matter where you are in the world, you can log in on any device, anywhere in the world, and access to view them. The problem with password managers, as we see it, is they're all trading off convenience over security by saying, hey, listen, you can share this easily by airdrop, or you can share this by... Every time you share a password, you have to ask yourself, how did that happen? Like someone had to copy and paste from your information to someone else's place for storing information to temporarily transfer it to someone else. That even if you wanted that to happen, you have to wonder what's going on in the background and how much information has been copied. And it's pretty scary. I'm not saying about password managers, but in general, we've done a very significant deep dive into digging into the back end of what browser extensions generally are extracting from your browsing, and it's pretty scary.
We all know that these days, like yourself, you just have to be comfortable with the data being out there in a way. In a way, well, privacy will be key now going forward, right? And you mentioned as well, cyber will be a big topic as well going forward. As we become more connected, more data we're sharing, right? People smartness as well from the hacking community as well. Like they become very very professionalized. So I think we have to really look at that area carefully. Well, so the segue, right, Aidan, because you guys had a very interesting crowdfunding journey, right? And at the start, you guys said yourselves, I'm gonna bring my money to the table. So you guys were okay. We started kickstarting this initially, 600K. Here we go, right? Building the product after you guys agreed, okay, this is the right team. Talk us through that journey. You can start from the initial stages where you guys put the money on the table to where you guys now went for crowdfunding of 900 and then over doubled it, right? So that was good. That was a good one.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sort of still. I'm in PTSD mode at the minute because it was a good one, but I tell you, it's a traumatic one. It's a lot of work. So go back to where you said, earlier about when we started. We actually got some very early support from an angel network in California, and they have been hugely supportive and will be phenomenally helpful and instrumental to us because we have our US base located. We will be incorporating soon, and those, I was going to say guys, but males and females over there, those men and women did an enormous job in, probably not for them putting a huge amount of money our way, but backing it up with a massive amount of qualitative support, help in networking, help in resource help in like I said, literally the logistics of existing in the United States before you actually exist in the United States, if that makes sense. And that was a big solid foundation for us. We had a fund, a digital asset fund, Deep Paradigm Capital, who also invested in that at that early stage, and then we had a couple of our network who contributed. So we purposely did not raise huge amounts of money at that time, but we were absolutely delighted that we had raised a sufficient amount to start. And the start was, we had the product, we had the IP, which was patent pending at the time. We just created a new business, and then we needed to create a brand, we needed to create a purpose, we needed to be certain about what we were commercializing and where, and then we needed to go forward. So that was September 2021 to sort of March, April 22, where we went through all of that. And then we needed to look at, okay, next stage. And it was obvious that we needed to raise to support our ability to go into that go-to-market phase of bringing product to market. In the very, very early days, when we registered Binarii Labs, we were based in beside Intel in Bixen, in a co-working space called the Business Barn. And the first thing we did was we registered with the local enterprise office in Kildare, who were magnificent, and they gave us priming grant support to enable us to create paid roles within the organization. So that was a key early point of support that came from the Irish ecosystem.
Yeah, the Leos are great.
Yeah, and it couldn't have happened if we hadn't had our angel funding and our network funding. So, we went to them, showing them what we had, showing them where we wanted to go,
What's going to go?
and they liked it. They approved us, and they gave us what's called a priming grant. Look, which in the scheme of things now isn't a huge amount of money, but at the time was absolutely invaluable.
Yes.
And once you do that, you also are, on the Enterprise Ireland radar, because Enterprise Ireland work hand in hand with the Leos. So in 2022, as I say, two things happened. One, I was asked to go to pitch in Washington, D.C. at the Select USA. And the Select USA is the federal, all-American, all-state get-together of all of the what they call local economic developers in America. So it blew me away. They are so hungry and so determined to bring business to America. It's phenomenal how organized it is, how structured it is, and how many of them there are. We were at this massive big conference in Washington, D.C. So I was asked, the Department of Commerce, the US Department of Commerce, based here in Ireland, came to Nova UCD, where we are now, and we were asked to apply to go. We were accepted. So we went on the trip, and I was asked to pitch in DC. And the US director for Enterprise Ireland met me over there and started to speak about, Enterprise Ireland and deeper supports. So he put me in touch then when we came back with the people in HPSU. So two things happened. One, we were made a HPSU client, which is High Potential Startup Unit. And two, we decided we need to raise money and go through the Enterprise Ireland match funding process. You and I spoke about this before. The market for raising money through VC or through what you might call the traditional path is very, very, very difficult right now. But conversely, the opportunity for individuals to invest in startups that they might have an interest in is almost non-existent.
And let's unpack a bit with that, Aidan, because there's the area that you guys are in the DLT space, you guys in the we can even say the Web3 space. It depends on how you want to categorize it, right? So the investors look at you guys differently, right? A bit riskier, right? People did not have a fully understanding of the space. So they're less of that pool as well with that risk appetite. So it's very interesting one to unpack. And then on the other side as well, right? You guys went to the crowdfunding, and there's things moving now in Ireland, right? When it comes to the crowdfunding space, the legislation. So unpack a bit that for the listeners.
Yeah. So look, it's very true to it actually aligns very much to our own values and beliefs around, essentially democratization of opportunity. And we really like the idea of enabling people who get us, who like us, who are interested in us, to invest in us.
Yes.
To do that though, as a business, is pretty much impossible. So, you need a crowdfunding platform to be able to support. Spark Crowdfunding are a platform who do a really brilliant job here in Ireland of not only tapping into their own database of regular investors who invest in different startups through their platform, but also tapping into the Irish government's Entrepreneur Investment Incentive Scheme, the EWIS, which gives tax relief for investors at source. So between EWIS and the ability to access these people through the Spark crowdfunding, we had first of all, I have to stress, it wasn't our decision. Like, we had to go and apply to be vetted to be allowed to do this in the first place.
Yes,
Like
of
Spark
course.
crowdfunding is not there to just say, "Hey,
Hey,
I'd like to raise some money,"
throw that in there.
Yeah, here we go. I'm ready. Here's my video pitch. Where's my money? Right? There's a lot of work, and it's reassuring. It's very reassuring for the investors and to us that there is a lot of work, because having said that, they've got a pretty streamlined process at this stage. That yes, there's a lot of work, but it's organized, it's formatted in such a way that ultimately it can all happen very, very quickly. Um, and that's what was kind of blew us away, to be honest. We had a lot of good news that we knew was, well, we hoped was breaking at the time that we launched the campaign, and thankfully it did. The biggest news piece was that we had won a place in EIT Digital's Open Innovation Factory, and that meant we'd secured 400k in funding from the European Innovation Fund through that process. So I suppose, look, park what we do and what our business is, and look at what we had. And from an investor's perspective, we had a solid start with really strong credible angel investors in California. We had doubled down on that with other people who had rowed in and supported us at that early stage. We have a team of 4 founders with diverse skill set and a lot of experience across industries, not just focused on all, speaking the same language and understanding the same problems. We had a product with IP that was patent pending that is phenomenal, and we had already started to tap into routes to market and hitting revenue at early stage. So forget the industry, forget the product. Those are the tick boxes that an investor needs to see, and I can't really answer as to specifically why ultimately it ended up being a much bigger success than we envisioned.
Well, let's unpack it a bit.
We'd have to ask the investors that, right? And
of course. But let's say, as you said, you can contribute as low as 100, right? 100 euros in, right? But one of the things, Aidan, I'll say what you guys will say, okay, the target is 900, right? And you guys went through all the whole process. And then when you're seeing it going up, tick, 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 tick. Oh, we're closed. It just blew over.
Well, we had a few valley of death moments in there as well, right? Because it was a short space of time, but it's very hard not to watch, right?
Yes, you're watching it, right?
Refresh. No, and Chris from Spark will have an ongoing joke about that. How many times have you refreshed today? Because you're looking at the graph, right? But no, we had. I suppose to unpack it, we know that we have 186 investors from Spark, and the combined total that came from them just reached 1 million. And then we had other investors who we had already been engaged with, who also contributed. And then we had Europe, and now we're just actually finalizing going through the Enterprise Ireland process, which we hope brings us match funding. So we expect or hope that, in the next number of weeks, we will have reached 2.35 in total. And that's been the makeup.
And that's what people don't understand. There's strategy for all this, right? Aidan, as you said as well, you guys already prepped some investors, right? So people say if you prep at least 20% of your funds, so you twinkle it in as you go, so keep the momentum going, right? So there's strategies to all this. So you said beforehand, you guys already had around 800, right?
We had, yeah. So we had, I'm sorry, I'm just. Well, actually, so we had Europe.
You had some amount.
Yeah. So we had Europe, right? We had Europe, which happened during the campaign, okay, which is something we were hoping and expecting would happen. And then we had other commitments at the time so we had 500 actually. Sorry, we had 500. Yeah, absolutely committed with 500 before starting.
Which is fantastic work on the background. I think everyone going into this process of crowdfunding they do have to have at least 20% up like committed, as you say, Aidan, because that makes the process easier, but also helps to drive momentum when it needs it, right? So coming back to the values of death, you're saying, you get the values of death, okay, pump, pump, pump.
No, we had, and look, this is what I mean by the process that Spark crowdfunding go through in approving you. Um, they will not bring an investable project to their investors unless they see, that there's a track record, that there's an ability to raise, and that there is some capital there already committed, because it makes sense, right? And the benefit of doing that versus going, and we did ultimately, and still we have interest from VCs, and we did have interest from VCs. We even had an offer, which we turned down.
A buyout, is it?
No, VC investment. But one of the reasons for that was it was actually quite late at the stage, and we knew that actually the Spark campaign was going really, really well and was going to close in a couple of weeks successfully, and we just didn't have enough even left to allocate. So we were really delighted with how, as I said, how the combined total of the investment from the Spark individuals accumulated and got to at the end. But what that gives us and gave us at the time, regardless of the total, was an ability to close. Because if you're going to look for money from VCs and you're going to go, they have to go through their process. They have to go through their due diligence, and they have to take their time, more so now than ever before. There's something like 20%, I believe, of there's 20% of what was invested in year-to-date 2021 is what's been invested year-to-date 2023, I believe, in general in VC in Ireland, right? So that's a challenge, and the VCs themselves are challenged. They're challenged because there's different, there's different metrics, there's different considerations, there's different concerns, and valuation is a big thing, right? So they have to, they're managing other people's money. They have to go through their processes to ensure they get a return, and that all takes time. And there isn't any certainty on that until not even a term sheet is signed. At this stage, it's until money's in the bank, right?
100%.
And that all takes time, and that time is a huge cost to a business in trying to progress, whilst also, not necessarily having a conclusion on what your funding journey is going to look like. So that's a huge benefit to Spark, whether it's successful or whether it's not. You get to an end point, you have a certain amount raised, and you know exactly what it is, and you close, and then you're liquid.
100%. I love that you mentioned that as well, Aidan, about it's not 100% there until the money is in the bank, right? So I think that is a key insight here as well on when you're anyone going to a funding round. But here I'd like as well to talk a bit about the values of debt from an entrepreneurship perspective, business perspective, right? As well, right? Because it's a hard journey, right? So Aidan, tell us some moments, if you can share some good stories as you guys went as a team, right? Be it meetings or some really, really, hard walls that you guys can hit, and then okay, we got through it though.
That's a tough question.
It couldn't have been.
I think no, absolutely. I think every never mind entrepreneurs, right? I think every salesperson in the world would resonate with the enthusiasm and maybe over exuberance you have the moment somebody expresses an interest in you because you're trying to sell something, right? If we're going to market trying to sell a product, I think we always have to temper our enthusiasm for this opportunity and our real joy in sharing the story and telling what we're doing with the reality of, is this person or entity going to part with cold hard cash? And without going into specifics, certainly, yeah, we've had big letdown moments where we felt there was probably one key um, enterprise where we felt we had really we had, I think, 5 meetings done over the course of 3 or 4 months, and it was at an early stage where it's really really hard, where you're kind of pitching the vision and the dream rather than an actual product. And
Mm.
we've been determined to get product to market to not have to do that, but there are times along the way where you have to do that.
Mm.
So yeah, there was probably one in particular that was pretty hard. It was pretty much a good punch, where we really thought we had, engagement. We had a partnership where we were going to bespoke build DMS for them and with them. And in the end, the computer said no. And, we'll be back and they'll be back. And there was a lot of learnings in that. And the learnings were particularly what we knew already. We need to have our product there. We need to
Product.
show our product. We need to showcase it in action in the real world, not in a virtual situation. And
Mm.
that's what we're very thankful to be doing now and able to do. Um, so I mentioned earlier about DMS and pilot clients. So Sherwin O'Riordan solicitors here in Dublin
Mm.
are a nice sized firm that handle a lot of corporate business. They do an awful lot of due diligence on investments, and we're now onboarding them. And it's a credit to them that they have understood how we enable them to protect their clients' documentation, particularly around sort of data and deal room scenarios,
Yes.
better than anyone else, um, and how they can also protect themselves moving forward with how regulation is moving, particularly around DORA, right? So
Yes.
I know we said we wouldn't dive too much into DORA, but believe it or not, I enjoy talking about it. Now, DORA, as you know, is only impacting regulated financial services.
Mm.
However, my view and our view is that it's not long before
It
the,
moves
the, the
across.
intentions around DORA are going to extend to other industries,
Mm.
particularly other regulated industries. So I think pharma, but legal first, right? Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not. But regardless of whether DORA starts to apply to other industries, it already applies to the supply chain, to regulated
Mm.
financial services. So if you're in funds, DORA impacts you. But if you're not in funds, but you service someone in funds, then it's going to impact you as well, because someone who's in funds or in the regulated financial services industry needs to be able to account for their supply chain, for their outsourcing, for their and how, in particular, they can remain digitally operationally resilient when the subcontractor or the sub provider of the provider, who is the provider to the ultimate entity, has a weakness. And that's where we see that a cloud contingency, which is a requirement, is
Mm.
not being served, and we serve it. And the ability to show an effective way for business continuity, we demonstrated, and also mitigate or eliminate disaster recovery. So to me, those are the key points in DORA. But also, I'm really glad that DORA exists, because this is a key education point for business everywhere.
Uh,
People need to understand those risks and really drill down into the checklist of where are we in our risk register, who is our concern, and where and when, with the greatest respect to every legal DMS out there, when a solicitor signs up using a legal DMS and they're told, we hold your data and we hold it securely, trust us, to me that's a risk.
No, that's the thing. I think you guys nailed it. You guys on regulated space. The problem, the pain is there, right? And I'm a believer as well, same as you, Aidan. Like you look at regulation, you can look at it from opportunity perspective, right? So people look at it from a challenge perspective, but if you look at it opportunities and then look at potentially how the regulation will evolve through time, then you're looking at really a good market opportunity, right? You can start small, and then if you add industries like health tech, med tech, depends on where you want to go with it, or biotech, then it's have become very interesting as a proposition. One of the things as well, and I want us to talk about is that customer discovery, right? Because you guys went about it right. I'm a believer that you build a product, right? You test it with the market. Does the market understand that? You do that validation stage, right? And then you go and try and scale that product once you understood there's actually a problem here we're solving, and there's a product market fit to an element of it, right? So you start with small around the funding, and then you progress it. Talk to us about some customer discovery interviews
Yeah.
or chats that you guys had, and where it led.
Yeah, so Stephen and myself were able to take a back seat in this, and Kieran McNamee and Nigel Carter very much led. And both of them come from investment banking backgrounds, and their network is what we were able to tap into through them in meeting and talking to not even potential clients, but people in industry who may or may not have had the problem that we wanted to validate, right? So you've mentioned a couple of them previously. So the network that expanded from there, some of them formerly became advisors to Binarii Labs. So Ryan Afritic in South Africa, Scott Hamilton in Hong Kong, we had Professor Emmanuel Kyprios here, who's head of an innovation and strategy module in National University of Maynooth, who comes from a trading background. Not bizarrely, but in a different perspective, we have Fionn Lahart, who's the founder of One Projects here in Ireland, who are in pharma. So we went to speak, with all of these, and tried to essentially explain where we were coming from. And those are all people who understood the problem. The first test was, do you guys understand how we could be a solution to this problem?
Yes.
And they all, not only did they agree, but most of them, a lot of them have actually signed up to become distributors to work with us to go to market. So we didn't just sort of end up validating the problem, but we actually found a route to market that appeared to be really, really strong. Now, frankly, we have to test that yet, and that's what's exciting about the next few months, is because we actually go live with Psycure through a much bigger, a much broader distributor market than just our closest advisors. But that's been built off the back of their help and support. So what did they do? Well, they went out and they went and brought people to us and introduced enterprises and entities to us. Nigel was particularly focused in the UK, and the Millennium Chambers in London, for instance, are a phenomenal organisation who already operate a digital chamber service for barrister and solicitor connectivity through their clients, right? So they're a particular interesting one for us as we focus on the legal sector. And as I said before, where Kieran introduced Ryan Afritic in EA Capital in South Africa, that actually has opened up a remarkable opportunity in Africa, where we're now, they're kind of the branch into at the moment Nigeria, Ethiopia. We have there's so many now actually that we have 6 African countries working with the South African hub at the moment, with distributor networks to helping us to communicate the message, find the customer, and deliver the product. And that's growing every day. I mean, the reason I'm not up to speed is I can't keep up, frankly. Kieran every day is saying, we've had someone in, God knows where, and it's amazing, it's phenomenal, the level of engagement and interest. So what's our validation? Our validation is that these people are actually understanding the solution. committing to do work and spend money to help to promote it and sell it, and do so off the back of having seen it and allowed us sometimes only, frankly, half an hour of explaining it to them so that they get it.
It's one of those things, right? Africa is an incredible network, but as you said, there's a lot of tentacles. Then you start moving, or when you start understanding the ecosystem, there's a lot of players that they were brought in. Oh, about these guys. If you talk to these guys, talk to those guys. I really love the space and deep diving a lot in the
I
space.
mean, I'm not going to say it's an eye opener because I always knew it and we always knew it, but it's actually energizing to be around the enthusiasm that comes from the African network. It's phenomenal. I've had less reason to join in on some of those calls, but when you do join in on those calls and it's with people who, want to understand your product because they really, and look, you can get into a much deeper discussion around Africa, but the fact that there is such a need for people to be able to protect, particularly digital assets in Africa, there's reasons behind that, and it's because their own banking infrastructure is either non-existent or has let them down so much and doesn't serve them that they need alternatives, and that's why huge companies that exist in the payment space uh, have been so phenomenally successful in reaching into Africa as a rich market. But the other side of it is that the ingenuity and innovation and fresh thinking that comes from Africa when we get on these calls and listen to the communities that these people are involved in fintech in Africa, it's brilliant.
No, Aidan, I was a big believer that there in developing countries, innovations are a necessity, and you have an ability to think more outside of the box because you can leapfrog things, right? Some people might say there's less regulatory barriers, but also there's less stakeholders to move around in a way, right? At times, I love what you mentioned there as well around the power of the network. I do believe an idea, an entrepreneur, right? In order to be successful, I think the network is a very big focus for anyone starting a business. Well, let's segue into fintech because you mentioned fintech, right? You're very close to an end, but I'd like to get your views around the fintech. What are the current challenges you see, and where you'd like to go in the next 5 years? You can be mad with your wish, right? As well, it's like, okay, this is what the ideal scenario is, but not from a binary perspective. You can give some from a binary perspective, but from an ecosystem perspective. Aidan.
Yeah, you mean in Ireland?
Ireland and EU, and you can go beyond as well if you want.
Um, it's interesting because I was actually sat in on a meeting in the Department of Finance yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, where the minister had asked for a select few people from industry to come and meet with the public sector. So you had Central Bank of Ireland, Enterprise Ireland, Department of Finance, and ISIF all there, and it was very interesting to appreciate their openness and willingness to really ensure that they are going in the right direction to support the fintech ecosystem in Ireland. And I wouldn't like I there's maybe a trend for wanting to be critical of supports or lack of supports. I don't genuinely don't subscribe to that. We've had so much support, and look, we're different. We're not a licensed, regulated business in the sense that we're providing the infrastructure and the tools. We're not moving money. We don't need to be regulated in that sense. We are heavily compliant in terms of like moving towards ISO 27001. We understand regulation and the need for regulation. I do think that there's a huge element of fintech that kind of needs to grow up and not just be outside the glass house throwing stones back in, but actually appreciate. No, I do, because like let's look at businesses of substance that have not just survived, but absolutely thrived in providing alternative ways for people to transact, right? And some reluctantly and some by design, but they've always ended up in a regulated environment. Okay, you know, you can sit and kind of throw stones at certain regulators, but and say that they're better elsewhere or they're easier to go and deal with a license elsewhere. But ultimately, that ultimately there's a need for regulation in that. Okay, I
100%.
think, yeah, and I take comfort that those that have proven that brilliant innovative technology can coexist with regulatory pathways are the ones that are winning, because ultimately it's about consumer protection, right?
Yeah, bottom
And
line.
yeah, and I, yeah. So like I said, I'm not saying everything is perfect in every ecosystem in terms of, supports and growth and ability for, a certain industry to shine.
Uh,
But
Comes back what we mentioned earlier about even your trajectory as well. I think we can do that trajectory in fintech when we'll come back. We have some substance on the table, some players that, right, part of the founder team. We raise initial capital, right, to prove the product before you start building the monster. A lot of people want to build the monster straight away, but there's a part as well raising the pre-seed fund, establishing some initial product market fit before you start going for the millions, right? I think there's a path there in the fintech industry in Ireland and in Europe, and it has been proven. You're right, Aidan. There's ways to do this. As an entrepreneur, you have to be,
yeah,
find
but don't get me
ingenuity,
wrong.
right?
Look, don't get me wrong. There is a lot of education and there's a lot of barriers that need to be dropped, right? And I think that is happening. So probably too slowly. Budget's a point is a particular point of interest, and I think generally in terms of Irish entrepreneurial ecosystem, there's still not enough support financially in terms of the ability to allow an entrepreneur to tap into tax relief. What was announced yesterday in terms of extension of entrepreneur relief, it's a bit of smoke and mirrors as far as I'm concerned, because it really doesn't understand the fundamentals of how angels work and how angels can be. It doesn't make sense to me that whether it be fintech or any other business, that an entrepreneur, that angels in what should I say, that in the riskiest environment, in the worst of markets, that we continue to essentially exclude or differentiate between angels and traditional funders. Angels should get the benefit of greater supports and greater tax relief for the fact that they're risking their own capital, not managing other people's. And while I believe there's good intention behind some of the moves, I think there's a lot more that could be done. But in general, like I said, we went to local enterprise office day one. We got support. We've in Enterprise Ireland, we've got support. We've got huge support from Enterprise
Yeah,
Ireland now in going
Aidan,
forward.
the infrastructure here in Ireland for a startup, I think, is pretty good. Coming back
Yeah,
from the Leos all the way to HBSU, but as you said, there's some challenges, of course, with any ecosystem. If you look at the likes of US, how they deploy capital, how they really go after the opportunity once there's an element of product market fit, the rounds. I think there's way to go still, right? But
yeah,
Aidan,
yeah,
tell
yeah,
me, where do you
yeah.
think the opportunity is for Ireland and Europe? From a fintech
Oh,
perspective,
oh,
where are you seeing?
we,
Where
it
do you
was
believe?
actually said. It was actually said
Put your
yesterday.
chips on the
Very,
table.
yeah, it was said yesterday very, very well. If you look at the phones industry in Ireland and look at how phenomenally Ireland has serviced the funds industry, to be
Fintech.
a world leader, then why not? Why not the support and allow and enable the technology providers who service that industry to also reach those heights? I honestly believe, I think I said in a post yesterday, I used to say we're punching above our weight. I actually think we're setting a weight class of our own now, because when you look at the quality,
Ooh, fighting wars. Eh?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
nice.
but when you look at the quality and the intellect and the deep understanding of the problems that's emerging from, and you see it then in Dogpatch and all these places, we're here in Nova UCD, every day you're walking around absolutely amazed by the intelligence and the ability for people to execute. I'm not sure how, but to elevate fintech or even technology and financial services to a level such as the funds industry was when that decision was made back in the day, to focus on that from a government perspective, could be transformational for this country, never mind the industry.
I love that. I love that opportunity segment, Aidan, because Ireland has built an incredible platform with IFSC here, right? And the ecosystem is just about connecting the ecosystem and building the next version of the IFSC, which will bring incredible economical value for Ireland, right? Well, Aidan, where can people find you? Where can people find Binarii Labs? Or where do you guys hang out? Social
Well,
channels.
social. Well, we don't have a social life anymore.
No,
No, we will be emerging on Twitter pretty soon. The
very
best
good.
place to find us is on LinkedIn right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe sometimes for me too much so. I sometimes get dragged in. No, listen. Our website right now is there, but it's literally just a very basic, informative website around who we are and what we do. The best place to find us is LinkedIn, and we appreciate a lot of interest and support that exists on LinkedIn. Actually, we find it to be generally very, very positive. But we're moving to all sorts of different channels and mediums pretty soon.
And it's binarylabs.com, just in
Yeah.
case. And Aidan, is there anything you want to share in next months will happening from a Binarii Lab perspective? I know you shared the product. If there's anything else you want people to keep an eye out, feel free to share with
No,
us, and we get the
no. As
word
I
out there.
say, it's an exciting quarter ahead because we will be providing the early adopter offer opportunity for Cycler, which would be a phenomenal value offering through our distributor network. And there's going to be a limited number of places for people to basically start to use the product, and we will work closely with that group of probably only 100,000 people globally, and then when we move into next year to really scaling wider, those people will be valued and supported as the early adopters in many ways other than just discount.
Thanks again, Aidan. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. I really enjoyed
You're a
the
gentleman.
pod.
I'm glad we got here in the end. Yeah.